Good afternoon. We're here in Las Vegas, Nevada at the American Academy of Ophthalmology with Dr. George Asimelis and Dr. John Kanellopoulos, both from Athens, Greece, and it's a pleasure to have you here today, gentlemen. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Jonathan.
John, I'd like to start off by having you summarize for us where we've been in terms of corneal imaging, specifically at detecting ectasia. What technologies have been available to us, and how does this set us up for new technologies that are becoming of interest?
It's a very interesting point. There's no doubt that with the advent of computerized cornea topography, we as cornea surgeons became much more knowledgeable, more sensitive in diagnosing ectasia and corneal irregularities. Then we saw, this was over 25 years ago, then we saw the initial tomographic devices with the orb scan, the scanning slit tomography, and then the Seinflug imaging come in and give us a much more three-dimensional, if you may, imaging of the cornea, which made it far more sensitive in detecting early changes of the cornea, ectasia, pre-ectasia, progression, et cetera, et cetera. We as a team, and George Asimelis is our PhD, who's a research coordinator in our center in Athens, have developed a very strong interest in early diagnosis and progression diagnosis in keratoconus, and we have been fortunate to be able to correlate pretty much every diagnostic device that's available out there the last 10 years. And we have found over the last 3-4 years that the evolution of spectral domain OCTs is giving us a great, probably next frontier in the evolution of cornea diagnostics.
Well, George, let me ask you, how does corneal OCT work, and specifically, what area of the cornea are we imaging when we're looking for ectasia?
Well, OCT is doing meridional scans. Much like the Seinflug imaging, it's a rotating slit that takes the B scans, 8 of them, and then correlates all of them and produces the maps, thickness maps. So far, it can be 6, can be 9 millimeters. It does not cover a lot. It doesn't cover so far the 12 millimeter we would like to. So ideally, you look at the center or paracentral, and then you get the thickness maps of the entire cornea and the epithelial thickness. This is the novelty of the OCTs, has the fine structure, the detail that other modalities lack, that can show you the 50 or 30 micron deep epithelial map, and which tells you a lot. It's a hidden feature in every other technology so far.
So why is the corneal epithelium so important? Isn't that just the surface of the cornea? Aren't we more interested in curvature?
Well, that's the thing. The curvature is the frontier, and the frontier is the epithelium. And the epithelium masks locally the irregularities beneath the stroma. Where the stroma is curving inwards, then the epithelium is thicker in order to cover this abnormality. So what you see is not the stroma. You see the epithelial cover of the irregularities of the stroma, and with OCT you can expose this. So if you see irregular epithelium, immediately you know it's an irregular stroma beneath. The two of them may not be so irregular.
So what you're suggesting is that small irregularities in the stroma that may go undetected in Placido or Seinflug imaging may be picked up on OCT,
yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And then what does that tell us? How does the corneal epithelial thickness tell us about the health of the cornea and the presence or absence of ectasia?
Well, first of all, if you see the maps, green is good, red is danger, and yellow is be aware. So immediately you see the color code, and you are aware that something is fishy about this cornea. It's not exactly healthy. If you see green and green everywhere, then you're more comfortable into exploring the fine details of curvature. If this patient is LASIK surgery candidate, you can measure with confidence what the refraction is, and then you can proceed on surgery. If you see, for example, dry eye, it can be yellow. So you're aware of that. It can see contact lens warp patch. So you ask the patient, have you been out of contact lens use for the last 1 month? He says, yeah, sure, yeah, I have been. And then you see the contact lens, the warp patch on the epithelium, and then you're aware of that. So there are many little secrets.
I want to go back in the cornea epithelium discussion. We as surgeons are accustomed to considering the epithelium a homogeneous blanket over the cornea and disregarded as far as its ability to give us information. We have reported extensively with spectral domain OCTs that the cornea epithelium is probably the most consistent metric, if not in the whole body, definitely for the eye. So any deviation from this uniform layer of epithelium in the cornea, in my opinion, is extremely significant diagnostically, not only detecting keratoconus, but in order to have a reliable refraction, and we have found this in order to correctly clinically read a placido disc topography and or a sine fluke produced tomography. Because if there's epithelial irregularity, and I don't exactly agree with every epithelial irregularity is a stromal irregularity, because you can have dryness, which theoretically should not affect the stroma, but it holds true in ectasia. But if you have an epithelial irregularity, then you have to be very skeptical about the posterior curvature data that the pentacam gives you in that particular patient.
Because they extrapolate.
Exactly. So we now have a metric here that is far more accurate, and any measurement with pentacam map or with a placido disc based topography map, even with the Cassini maps, which is a multicolor reflection tomography, we want to correlate it with the OCT in order to make sure it's true or biased. And what it boils down to, because I'm more interested in how is it making a difference for me in my clinical practice, is that we are convinced that ectasia is a change in cornea thickness, in cornea stromal thickness. So this early change in cornea stromal thickness will be masked by the epithelial remodeling. So it will be hidden from the placido disc imaging and the sine fluke imaging.
So John, let me ask you to summarize for us, if you have a patient clinically who has abnormality on their OCT epithelial imaging, yet they have a normal Scheimpflug and placido disc scan, how do you approach that patient clinically if they are, for example, seeking laser vision correction or cataract surgery, in terms of discussing what the implications of epithelial thinning may be for them?
It's a very good question, and I'll take it even further to share with you the fact that in our clinical setting, we screen every single patient that walks in the office every single time with a spectral domain OCT stromal and epithelial mapping, because we use this, as you mentioned, as a tool to address the reliability of the other topographers, also the reliability of the refraction we're going to obtain for that patient. So if, for instance, there was significant irregularity in a patient because of dry eye, we'd like to treat that first, dry eye blepharitis, to obtain reliable epithelial maps and thus reliable refractive measurements. If there was any irregularity in the OCT suggesting ectasia, then we would consult the patient accordingly towards cross-linking and or a surface ablation instead of LASIK or SMILE. But I think that if of the 20 cornea diagnostics that we currently employ in our center, if I was left for some reason with only one, there's no question in my mind that today the most reliable and accurate device is the spectral domain OCT.
And easy to use, we have to say that too.
Yeah, the capture is also probably the fastest of the devices, which is also a nice pearl. But I think that we work with the OptiView device, but I think that every single spectral domain OCT device will eventually evolve into giving these very valuable anterior segment data that will really change the way we practice anterior segment diagnostics and surgery, in my opinion.
Well, John, George, this has been a fascinating overview of anterior segment imaging and specifically OCT imaging of the corneal epithelium, and I'm so glad you're able to share this technology with us. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.